There was a particular sound in an elementary school cafeteria in 1963, right around 11:45, that separated the children who had store-bought lunches from the children who didn't. It was the sound of wax paper, not plastic, not tinfoil crinkling the way it does today. Wax paper, folded twice and tucked under itself. No tape, because Big Mama didn't believe in wasting tape on something a fold could handle. You'd hear that paper before you ever saw what was inside it. And if you were a child sitting 3 seats down, you already knew somebody at that end of the table was about to eat better than the cafeteria. Line had to offer that day. Some of those lunches don't exist anymore, not because the recipes were lost exactly, though some of them were. They disappeared because the women who made them disappeared, and because the world stopped needing a woman to get up before the sun to make sure a child left the house with something warm, wrapped in paper, and something like love folded in beside it. Nobody talks about that part. Everybody remembers school lunch. Almost nobody remembers what was really being packed in that bag. Today we're going back to that cafeteria table. 25 lunches.
Here's your lunch, baby.
25
You
things
good
Big
now.
Mama put together with what she had, out of a kitchen that never had much extra. For a child, she was not about to send off into the world with an empty stomach or an empty bag. Hey family, I'm James. And if you've been with me a while, you already know what we do here. We go back and we remember,
see this here? You
together,
have to measure it
the
this
things
way.
this world
Okay,
has
I got it.
decided weren't worth writing
Is this the
down.
one with the pecan?
Today
That's
it's the
one.
lunches, the ones nobody sells you now, the ones you're not going to find in a lunchbox at the store. So if this is your first time sitting at this table with me, go on and hit that subscribe button right now. We're keeping this alive one memory at a time, and I want you here for every single one of them. All right, let's get into it. Number 1, the biscuit and syrup sandwich. Not jelly, syrup. Big Mama would split a leftover breakfast biscuit, the kind that had been sitting under a dish towel since 6 that morning, and she'd pour just enough cane syrup or sorghum inside to make it stick without making it a mess in your bag. She wrapped it tight in wax paper because she knew that syrup was going to try to escape the second that biscuit warmed up in your desk. By lunchtime, the syrup had soaked clean through, and that biscuit tasted like the whole kitchen it came from. You won't see that today. Nobody's child is opening a lunchbox to a syrup biscuit, but back in those days, that was a treat, and don't let anybody tell you different. Number 2, fried bologna between 2 slices of light bread. Now, I know that sounds simple, family, and it was. But Big Mama fried that bologna in a cast iron skillet that had cooked everything else that week too, so it picked up a little of everything, a little bacon grease, a little chicken fat from Sunday, and that bologna curled up at the edges just right. 2 pieces of white bread, a little mustard if there was any in the icebox, wrapped up and dropped in a paper sack that had already been used twice that same week. Nothing fancy. But that whole block would have told you fried bologna hit different when Big Mama made it. Number 3, the salmon croquette sandwich. This one was a Friday thing more than any other day because Friday was often when the icebox was running low and a can of salmon could stretch further than most people think. She'd mix it with a little egg, a little cracker crumb, fry it up golden in that same skillet, and press it flat between bread the next morning for lunch. The whole kitchen smelled like fish and onion the night before. And if you walked past a house on a Thursday evening and caught that smell, you knew Friday's lunch was already halfway done. Number 4, souse meat on crackers. Now, family, this one's not for everybody, and I know that. But souse, some folks called it hoghead cheese where they were from, was something Big Mama made from parts of the hog that nothing went to waste on. She'd slice it thin, lay it across saltine crackers, and send it wrapped in wax paper with a little extra vinegar sprinkled over the top. That whole block would smell it on Sunday morning when she was making it fresh, and by Monday it was riding in somebody's lunch sack, ready. Number 5, a jar of buttermilk and a piece of cornbread. Not a sandwich at all. Just a small mason jar, the lid wrapped tight with a rubber band so it wouldn't leak, filled with buttermilk, and a hunk of cornbread wrapped separate. You dunk the cornbread right into that buttermilk at the lunch table, and if you've never done that, child, you have missed something. That combination filled you up better than half of what the cafeteria was selling that day, and it cost Big Mama next to nothing to put together. Number 6, fatback and biscuit. A thin sliver of fried fatback, crispy at the edges, tucked inside a biscuit that had been split and buttered the night before. This one traveled well because the grease kept that biscuit from drying out by lunchtime, and it had just enough salt in it to make a child forget they were eating something so simple. My granddaddy worked 6 days a week and never once complained, And some mornings that fatback biscuit was the only breakfast he had time to eat, walking out the door. The second one went in a child's lunch bag on the way out behind him. Number 7. A boiled egg with a pinch of salt wrapped in a little twist of paper. Now this is about as simple as it gets, and that's exactly why I want you to remember it. Big Mama would boil a whole dozen eggs on a Sunday night, keep them in the icebox, and every morning that week one of them went into somebody's lunch bag with just enough salt folded into a scrap of paper so you could season it right there at the table. That whole ritual, boiling eggs on Sunday for the whole week ahead, that's something we don't do anymore. We buy things one day at a time now. She thought a week ahead, every single week, for every single child in that house. Number 8. Tomato sandwich, summer only. This one only showed up when the garden was giving, which in most southern towns meant late June through August. Thick slice of tomato, a little mayonnaise if it was in the icebox, salt and pepper, 2 pieces of bread pressed together tight so the juice didn't run everywhere. By the time lunch came around, that bread had soaked up just enough tomato juice to turn it a little pink at the edges, and that was the best part, not the worst part. Folks don't do this anymore, and that's a shame, because a good August tomato sandwich made from something grown 3 feet from the back porch tasted like nothing a grocery store tomato could ever give you. Number 9. Sweet potato biscuit with nothing else in it at all. Big Mama sometimes worked mashed sweet potato right into the biscuit dough itself, so the biscuit came out a little orange, a little sweeter than a regular one, dense enough to fill you up on its own. No filling needed. Just that biscuit, wrapped whole, dropped into the bag. This right here. This is something we need to bring back. A whole generation of children grew up on that biscuit, and most of them couldn't tell you the last time they've had one since. Now, before we keep going, family, I want to hear from you. What's the one thing your grandmother packed you for lunch that you've never seen anywhere since? Something you couldn't even explain to your own children if you tried? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and I promise you, somebody else reading right along with you is going to see their own Big Mama in what you write. Now let me say something, family, before we move any further into this list. Everything I'm telling you today, I didn't pull it out of thin air. I've spent years sitting on porches with women in their 80s and 90s. Women who still remember exactly what they packed their children in 1958, 1962, 1967. I've had grandmothers describe to me, detail for detail, what wax paper smelled like when you unfolded it at a lunch table 60 years ago. That's not something you find written down in a cookbook. That's something you have to sit and listen for. And the more of these conversations I have, the more I understand just how much of this was never going to survive on its own. It was living in memory, and memory doesn't last forever. And I want you to hear this too. If you don't remember every single one of these dishes, if some of these are new to you, that is not on you. Nobody sat you down and taught you this the way somebody should have. Ain't nobody's fault these things slipped away quiet like they did. There was no book. There was no lesson. There was just a woman in a kitchen doing what needed doing, and when she was gone, so was the knowing, unless somebody caught it before it left. Number 10, pear preserved biscuits. When the pear tree in the backyard gave more than the family could eat fresh, Big Mama put up preserves in jars that lined a pantry shelf all winter. Come lunchtime, a spoonful of those preserves between 2 halves of a warm biscuit was as close to dessert as most children got on a Tuesday. Sticky, sweet. Worth the mess it made on your hands by the time the bell rang for recess. Number 11, chow chow on cold cornbread. Chow chow, that relish made from cabbage, green tomato, pepper, vinegar, whatever the garden gave at the end of the season, sat in a jar in most southern kitchens all through the fall and winter. A spoonful spread across a cold piece of cornbread gave a child something with a little bite to it, something that woke the whole mouth up in the middle of a long school day. Now Big Mama, she used to say a good chow chow could make a plain piece of bread taste like a whole meal, and she wasn't exaggerating one bit. Number 12, fried chicken from Sunday, cold, wrapped whole. If Sunday's chicken had any leftovers by Monday morning, that was Monday's lunch, no questions asked. A whole cold chicken leg or thigh wrapped in wax paper, still holding on to some of that Sunday seasoning, even a full day later. Cold fried chicken has a flavor all its own. Family, a little denser, a little richer. And there are people to this day who will tell you cold Monday chicken tasted better than the chicken fresh out the skillet the day before. Number 13, a biscuit with a slice of country ham, salty enough to make you thirsty by 10 in the morning. That ham had been cured and hung, sliced thin and fried just enough to crisp the fat around the edges. Tucked in a biscuit, it traveled fine in a lunch bag without any icebox at all, because that salt had already done half the preserving work on its own. A child carrying that sandwich in third period could smell it through the paper, and every child sitting near them knew exactly what was coming when lunch bell rang. Now let me stop right here a second, family, because I need to tell you something. These 25 dishes I'm sharing with you today, they're a piece of what we almost lost. Just a piece. There are recipes tied up in these same lunch bags, these same kitchens, that never made it to a single conversation like this one, because the women who knew them passed on before anybody thought to ask. That's part of why I put together something called the Soul Roots Cookbook, 100 forgotten Black American recipes, written out complete, the way Big Mama would have done it if she'd ever had the time to sit down and write instead of cook. From the Sunday dinner table all the way down to what went in a school lunch bag. Every ingredient, every measurement, every little secret she never wrote anywhere else but in her own hands. The link's in the description below, and it's pinned right at the top of the comments too. If you're watching on a TV screen right now, there's a code up in the corner you can scan just as easy. Don't let these recipes disappear the way so many already have. Get it now, family, while you're thinking about it. Number 14. Sardines and crackers, wrapped separately so the crackers stayed crisp. A tin of sardines split between two children some weeks. A sleeve of crackers to go with it, and a little hot sauce shook right onto the fish before it ever left the kitchen. This was a lunch that stretched a nickel further than almost anything else on this list, and there is no shame at all in that. A family that knows how to stretch a nickel is a family that survives, and survival was never something to hide from. Number 15. Rice and gravy, packed warm in a mason jar, wrapped in a dish towel. Some mornings, if there was rice and gravy left from the night before, Big Mama would spoon it hot into a jar, screw the lid down tight, and wrap that whole jar in a towel to hold on to the heat until lunchtime. By the time a child unwrapped that towel 4 hours later, the jar was still just warm enough to remind you where it came from. That's a level of care most children today have never once experienced from a lunch. Number 16. A biscuit stuffed with crumbled cracklins. Cracklins, the crisp fried bits of pork skin left over from rendering lard, got worked right into a biscuit some mornings, giving that biscuit a salty crunch a plain one never had. It wasn't a delicate lunch. It wasn't meant to be. It was meant to fill a child up and hold them steady, clear through to 3 o'clock, and it did exactly that every single time. Number 17. Sweet tea in a thermos with a peanut butter and syrup sandwich. Peanut butter alone was one thing, but Big Mama sometimes added a thin line of cane syrup right on top of it before closing the sandwich, giving it a little more sweetness than store peanut butter and jelly ever offered. A thermos of sweet tea rounded it out, and if that tea had melted down to half ice by lunchtime, that was just fine. It still tasted like home. Now, family, we've come a long way together already, and if you've stayed with me through all 17 of these, that tells me something about you. It tells me these lunches mean something to you beyond just a list on a screen. Some of you are sitting there right now thinking, I'll ask my mama about the rest of these. I'll call my auntie and see if she remembers. I'll write it down one of these days. And family, I've been doing this a long time, long enough to tell you, one of these days sometimes never comes. The women who could tell you exactly what went in their own lunch bags 60 years ago are getting older every single year. And when they go, so does everything they never got the chance to say out loud. That's the whole reason the Soul Roots Cookbook exists in the first place. 100 recipes, sat down and gathered from women who lived it, written out complete with every tip Big Mama would have told you standing right there in her kitchen. You can keep hoping to catch these stories before it's too late, or you can have 100 of them already saved, sitting on your shelf today. The link's in the description, pinned in the comments, and the code's right there on your screen if that's easier for you. I've done my part gathering all this up. What you do with it next, family, that part's yours. Number 18, a cold biscuit with a slab of hoop cheese, the kind cut fresh off a wheel down at the general store. Hoop cheese had a sharpness to it that regular sliced cheese from a package never carried, and pressed inside a warm biscuit, it melted just enough at the edges to hold everything together. This was a Saturday errand kind of cheese, bought fresh, used within the week, gone before it ever had the chance to sit too long. Number 19, poke sallet with a piece of fatback, folded into a biscuit or eaten straight from a small jar with a spoon. Poke sallet, those wild greens that grew along fence lines and ditch banks every spring, had to be boiled just right. change water 2 or 3 times before it was safe to eat at all. Big Mama knew exactly how long, exactly how many changes, without ever measuring a thing. That kind of knowledge doesn't come from a book. It comes from watching your own mother do it, and her mother before that. Number 20. A whole sweet potato, baked the night before, wrapped whole in its own skin. No filling, no bread, no extra anything. Just a sweet potato, baked slow in the coals or the oven the night before, cooled and sent whole in a lunch bag the next day. A child could peel that skin back right at the lunch table and eat it plain, and it filled the stomach and warmed the spirit both at once, on the coldest days of winter especially. Number 21. A biscuit filled with nothing but a spoon of bacon grease and a sprinkle of black pepper. Now I know how that sounds to somebody who's never lived it. But bacon grease was never wasted in Big Mama's kitchen. It was saved in a can on the stove and used again and again, and a biscuit split and dipped straight in that seasoned grease, with a little pepper over the top, was a lunch some children looked forward to more than anything fancier. That was just how it was done, and nobody thought twice about it. Number 22. A jar of collard green juice, what some called the pot liquor, sipped alongside a piece of cornbread crumbled right down into it. This wasn't a full meal on its own most days, but on the days money was tightest, that jar of pot liquor and that crumbled cornbread was exactly what stood between a child and an empty stomach at 2 in the afternoon. It carried more vitamin and more love in it than most people today would ever guess by looking at it. Number 23. Now this one I want you to sit with a moment, family, because it's not really about the food at all. Some mornings when there wasn't much of anything left in that kitchen, when payday was still 3 days off and the ice box was down to almost nothing, Big Mama would send a child to school with 2 slices of light bread, folded plain, with nothing between them but a little sugar sprinkled across one side. A sugar sandwich. That's what some folks called it. And I need you to understand something. That was not a sign of a woman who didn't care. That was the opposite. That was a woman who was not about to let her child walk into that school building with an empty bag in their hand, even when there was almost nothing in the house to fill it with. She'd rather send sugar on bread than send nothing at all, because in her mind an empty lunch bag told the whole world something about her family that she was not willing to let anybody see. That sandwich was pride, wrapped in wax paper. Don't let anybody ever tell you different. If any of this has stirred something loose in you today, family, go ahead and hit that like button right now, wherever you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment. Go on and do it, because we've got a whole lot more of these memories still waiting to be told. And I want a comment from you before you go anywhere. Tell me, was there ever a day you remember your own mama or grandmother sending you to school with less than she wanted to, but making sure you never once felt it? Tell me what she sent you with. Tell me how she made it feel like enough. I read every single one, family, and I promise you somebody reading right behind you needs to hear your story just as much as I do. Number 24. A biscuit with nothing in it but butter, made fresh that same morning before the sun was even fully up, wrapped while it was still warm enough to soften whatever it touched. This wasn't the fanciest thing on this whole list. It was, in a lot of houses, the most common thing on it. And there is a particular kind of love in a woman waking before dawn every single school day, 52 weeks a year, just to make sure a biscuit was warm and ready before her child ever opened their eyes. We don't talk about that kind of love enough. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up every morning, whether anybody notices or not. Number 25, and this is the last one, family, and I've been saving it because I think it says more than any of the other 24 combined. There were mothers and grandmothers who, on days they had absolutely nothing left to pack, would send their child to school with an empty lunch bag folded neat and tell that child to tell the teacher they'd already eaten at home. Not because it was true, because that woman was not going to let her child sit in that cafeteria and be looked at with pity by anybody. She would rather her child go hungry with dignity than be fed with somebody else's charity written all over their face. That is not a small thing. That is the whole heart of everything we've talked about today. It was never really about the food. It was about a woman who was going to make sure her child walked through that world with their head up, no matter what she had to do behind the scenes to make that happen. Family, I've told you 25 lunches today, but if I'm honest with you, I could have told you 250. Every kitchen in every black household in this country between the 50s and the 70s had its own version of this list, its own woman standing at that counter before sunrise, doing what needed to be done with what she had. Some of what we talked about today, your own grandmother made a little different. Maybe she added something I didn't mention. Maybe she left something out I did. That's all right. That's the beauty of it. This was never one recipe. It was a whole way of loving somebody without ever having to say the word out loud. We didn't have much, but we had everything that mattered. And a child who walked into school with a biscuit wrapped in wax paper, made by a woman who got up before dawn to make sure that bag wasn't empty. That child was carrying something a lot heavier than lunch. They were carrying proof that somebody back home loved them enough to make sure of it. Every single day, rain or shine, good week or bad week. Share this one with somebody in your family who still remembers what was really in that lunch bag. Your mama, your auntie, the cousin who always tells that same story at every family gathering. This might be the nudge they need to finally tell it to somebody who's ready to write it down. Subscribe if you haven't already, because next week we're going somewhere just as real as today. I'll see you next time, family.